Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mara. I am the workshops and education coordinator for GreenThumb, which is the part of the New York City Parks Department that works with community gardens across the city. Today, we're doing another webinar in our series with Sam Van Aken from the Open Orchard in partnership with the Trust for Governor's Island. We're really excited to be in this virtual space with Sam, very lucky to be partnering with him and doing this series together. So thank you everyone for tuning in. We're gonna ask folks to stay muted for the duration of the webinar and use the chat to ask any questions and any comments. If you'd like to introduce yourself, we'd love to hear who's tuning in. I will be pulling questions out of the chat. So if you have any issues or questions, just let me know there and I'll ask Sam during the Q&A component. We are recording this webinar, so we'll have the video pinned on the facilitator, but if you want to turn off your camera just in case, you're invited to do so, your choice. And I think that's it. This is part of a series that we're doing in partnership with the Trust for Governor's Island, and you'll hear a little bit more about that project, but we're excited to be partnering and bringing both this educational content and eventually some very special trees to community gardeners across New York City. So with that, I'm going to, and I am here with my colleague, Tawana. Tawana, would you like to unmute and introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Tawana Bush. I am the events coordinator for GreenThumb. So I put on our 4 annual events throughout the year. It's Grow Together, Harvest Fair, Open Garden Day, and our annual Garden Recognition Awards. And I am now the head liaison for approving events that you all submit for your gardens. So, and I do a slew of other things, but that's the gist of what I do on a daily basis. So I'll hand it back over to you, Mara. Oh, before I go, just want to say thank you everyone for joining today's seminar, as Mara mentioned, and I hope that I get to see you all soon. Okay, back to you, Mara.
Thanks, Tawana. Yeah, we are staying remote for the time being as COVID-19 is still ongoing. And thanks everyone for joining. And I also hope that we can all be together in person at some point soon. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Shane from Trust for Governor's Island, who's going to give us a little bit more background and context on this whole project.
Cool. Thank you, Mara. And thank you all for coming. It's a really great turnout already, which is awesome. My name is Shane Brennan. I'm the Director of Public Programs at the Trust for Governor's Island. And for those of you who aren't familiar or maybe not local to New York City, Governor's Island is a 172-acre island in the middle of New York Harbor, about 5 minutes by ferry from Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn. And we're known for a few different things. We have all this open space for outdoor recreation, a lot of arts and culture programming, which we'll talk about a little bit today, as well as a lot of initiatives geared toward climate change and the environment and agriculture, including an urban farm and a brand new park. So we have a public art program that this project is connected to. And over the last several years, we've been really lucky to work with Sam Van Aken on a project that he's developing. About 2.5 years ago, Sam approached us with this really amazing and incredible idea, which was to create an orchard of 50 trees that would preserve hundreds of rare and heirloom fruit varieties. These are varieties that were grown locally in and around New York City hundreds of years ago, but which have gradually disappeared with the rise of industrial scale agriculture and climate change. This project, which he calls the Open Orchard, is currently in development, and it's an extension of his work that really goes back over the past decade, where he's worked in sites across the United States to create these hybrid trees that produce up to 40 different varieties of fruit on a single tree. So peaches growing to apricots and cherries and plums and nectarines. The orchard will scale this work up. So instead of just one hybrid tree, he'll plant 50 on Governor's Island sometime next year. And dozens more will be distributed for free to community gardens across the city with the help of our partners at GreenThumb, which we're really excited about. Effectively returning these varieties back into the neighborhoods in which they grew and preserving their biodiversity for the future. This workshop today is part of a series that's really integral to the Open Orchard project, and it's designed to take the skills and knowledge that go into making the orchard and share those with our community. So we've had workshops so far on grafting, tree care, fruit harvesting, even some cooking classes. And today we're going to look at best practices for planting trees in the fall. So I hope you'll come back for future workshops as they continue into next year and really follow along as this long-term project comes to life on Governor's Island. You can learn more about it on our website, govisland.org. And sign up for our newsletters to hear the latest. And with that, I will turn it back over to Mara to get us started. Thanks again for coming.
Great. Thank you so much, Shane, for that amazing introduction. If you missed our past workshops or you want to revisit them, I put a link in the chat where you can see all of the video recordings that we've done this year as part of this series and all of our other ones, if you're curious. And so, yeah, with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Sam. Again, please stay muted for the duration of the webinar and put any questions you have in the chat. Thanks, everyone. Wait, let me just unmute Sam. Hang on. Okay, mic is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mara and Shane. Yeah, so this is, I think, our 5th workshop, and it's been 7 or 8 months, and I'm still doing them from my house. Although this one I'm looking forward to because I'm outside. The last one in the kitchen was rather terrifying, and I realize I'm probably much more comfortable with dirt than food. So today we're going to talk about planting fruit trees. So there's a bunch of things that you need to consider before you even plant the tree. So we'll go over those, and then I'll show you how to plant a tree in fall and how you would go about planting one in the springtime as well. So first thing and foremost is sun. You want to make sure that wherever you're going to place your tree, you're going to have full sun throughout the day. There's no sense in putting it in shade because there's a number of reasons. One is obviously the growth, but secondly, to truly ripen, the fruit need to be exposed to sun. And so having that sunlight all day, it's going to make the tree more productive, going to make it happier and sort of healthier. The next thing is to find a location that isn't the lowest point in the yard or property. You can't really see it here, but this hill is actually sloping that we're planting on. And the reason for that is there's, again, a couple reasons for that as well. Lower parts in the yard are going to collect water. And fruit trees don't like they have this term for it called wet feet. So that means that the root structure doesn't like to be bogged down in water. And so you want to plant them up higher. So obviously a sloping hill works really well for that, but then also it gives a place for cold air to run off. Right, so the lowest part in your yard in the mornings is where it's going to collect the coolest air. So if you're planting on a hill, you can have the cool air run off. We're fortunate here because right down at the base of the hill there's a creek, and the cool air drains just like water, so it'll run out to the creek and follow that. You'll also see, so if those aren't an option and you have a relatively flat place to plant, so yard or field, what I would highly recommend is planting on a berm. So mound up the soil at least 4 to 6 inches and let it sit for a while and then plant on top of that. just having the root system of the tree sit up higher makes the trees much more successful. So in addition to having full sun, having it be in a raised area, the other thing that you want to think about is spacing. So in order to determine how much space you need for the tree, you have to know what root structure it's grafted on. So in previous workshops, we talked about this idea of grafting. And so this tree that we have right here is actually grafted. So this section was grafted onto this root structure. The root structure is going to determine the height of the tree and the size of the tree. So there's pretty much three main sizes. There's a standard tree that's going to grow to be 30 plus feet tall. There's a semi-dwarf tree that'll be 1/2 to 2/3 size. So that comes in at about 20 feet. But it's also going to have a canopy of 20 feet, right? So you need to be, this is a semi-dwarf root structure, so it's going to need to be 10 feet from another tree. And then, of course, they have dwarfing rootstock, and the dwarfing trees, they'll only grow to about 6 to 8 feet tall. There's advantages to each one. A dwarfing tree you could grow in a pot on a patio. But semi-dwarf trees and standard size trees are going to need much more room and much more soil. So yeah, that kind of knowing this root structure is going to tell you where to place a tree. So we're about 10 feet away from that tree for this root system. The next thing to know is what trees are around you. And this is particularly for apple trees. Apple trees are susceptible to a thing called cedar rust spot. So it's actually a bacterial fungal thing that carries through the air. And so this tree has a small cedar rust spot on it. It can actually get to the point and become so severe that it kills the tree. And yeah, so you want to make sure that if you're planting an apple tree that there aren't any cedars around. My neighbor has one, so I'm constantly battling it. So the next thing is to figure out what kind of soil that you're working with. And so here, I'm in central New York in Syracuse. Our soil is really clay-based, whereas New York, I mean, it's going to be tough. You really don't know what kind of soil you're dealing with, but the native soil is actually what they call a sandy loam, which means that it has sand, it has loam to it, and it's actually kind of ideal for growing fruit trees. So there's a couple of different ways that you can kind of assess the situation with the soil. The first one is like the cheap soil test thing. So what I do, this is going to sound really bad. This is not professional. So what I'll do, these are like cheap hardware store bought soil testers. And they're really good in terms of just getting a quick assessment of what the pH of the soil is. And some of them will even tell you the fertility. You just stick them in the ground. And the reason why I have 3 of them is because I kind of do 3 and then take the average. And it'll tell me sort of the soil pH. And, just having done this for a while, I can just kind of look at the soil and you'll know when it's very clay based. It looks like clay from art class. So the soil pH that you want 6.5 to 7 pH. And that's the range for almost all fruit trees, at least temperate. And so yeah, so you're going for 6.5 to 7 on the pH. Now, what I'll do, if I need a quick analysis, I'll use that 3 tester and do the average. But if I'm planting a tree, generally what I'll do is I'll take a soil sample and have it sent to Cornell. And so Cornell has this system, it's called CASH, where they'll analyze the soil, they'll tell you the pH, the aggregate, the fertility, but then they'll also give you directions on how to amend your soil. So that's the things you're going to need to add to the soil to to get it to be just about right for fruit trees. And they're pretty amazing. Like I had sent them some soil samples and called them on Friday, and I never heard back from them, but it was like 9:30 on Friday night, and they called with the answer, and I was like, that is like pretty good service. So, yeah, those are kind of the options on the soil and soil testing. So in an ideal situation, what you'll do is you'll prep your soil about 3 to 6 months ahead of time. So if you planned on planting in the spring, you would want to prep your soil this fall to get it ready. And what I'll do for that is I'll usually dig down about a foot, and I'll take up all the soil, and then I'll mix in an equal amount of compost and just replace the soil and let it sit. And obviously what'll start to happen is the compost will start to fertilize the soil. It'll get compacted, and then it'll be ready for spring. So this spot has been kind of working on this one since last, I guess, sort of like April or something like that. Yeah, so yeah, dig the hole, put in compost. So the times that I'm looking at for planting are generally the end of October. And with how warm it's been the past 4 or 5 years, I found that I can even go into December, you know, and even be planting in the first week in December. And then for spring, what I do is I try to plant before the trees break dormancy. So that's before they start to blossom in the springtime. So that's, you know, here, that's a, you know, it doesn't really happen until the third week in April. New York, it's generally around the, you know, last week in March, first week in April for that. So you definitely want to get the trees in then, before they start to really establish, because when they start to break dormancy, what they're doing is they're drawing a lot of moisture and a lot of nutrients from the soil. If you start too late, it's just going to really diminish the tree the first year, and I've seen it even last like 2 years. But you know, if I had my preference, I would always plant in October. I've just found it's sort of the best time. It gives the roots time to settle throughout, you know, throughout the winter, so that when the tree is ready to break dormancy, it really gets that first big shot of growth. I'm gonna check to make sure that you guys can still hear me.
Oh yeah, we're good.
Okay, awesome. Well, that was just from, I was teaching a class last week, and I was talking for like 15 minutes, and my internet had gone out. So yeah, I was like,
Oh no.
I just speaking into the dark? Great. Okay, cool. So we're ready to go through actually planting the tree. The other thing I found with like preparing to plant a tree is that if you live with somebody already planted like 50 or more trees in the yard, the biggest problem with planting a tree is convincing them that you need one more, but you probably aren't going to have that problem. So what we're going to do first is we're going to plant a bare root tree. So a lot of the nurseries that you order trees from have an option to ship you a bare root tree. It'll look, you know, it'll come in the mail. It'll be in a long box. These roots are going to be wrapped in sort of damp newspaper and probably have a plastic bag wrapped around the end. So you pull it out, it looks just like this. So for planting those, and these, you can plant these in the fall, but they're primarily planted in the spring. So what I'll do for these is, yeah, pull. All right. One of the things, it's a good idea to do. So typically when I get these, I'll get 50 to 100 at a time. And so what I'll do is I'll set up a series of 5-gallon buckets. And since the roots, no matter what you do, they're going to have dried out a little, I'll soak them in water for up to an hour to start to get the tree moisturized again. after that hour, it's going to be ready to plant. And so what I'll do is kind of see what the sort of the expanse of the roots. And then I'll start to come in and I'm going to build a mound in the middle of that hole. So we'll clear some of this out so you can see it. All right, so you can see how I built this mound. And the reason for that is you can see that these roots are coming out to the side. And what you're going to do as you place the rootstock is you're going to press it down into the center, and then you pat the different roots into different directions across that mound. And then you would cover it back in. The one important thing as I'm looking this that I forgot to talk about is the direction. So on here, so this is the root structure. This is the piece that was grafted. What you want to do is
Sam, can you come a little closer?
Oh, sure. Okay. How's that? Is that good?
Beautiful.
Okay. So this is the root structure, and this part right here is the graft. So this is actually a sensitive joint. And what you want to do as you plant the tree is have this graft section pointing north. So that way the southern sun is hitting this side and not hitting this side. So when I place this, they call that part the graft nut. So we want to make sure the graft knot is pointing north in that direction. Other things, you want to make sure that all of the roots are pointing down. They should never, ever be pointing up. That's not the way they grow. And so what I've done is I've taken all those sort of knotted roots and I've pushed them out in different directions. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take loose soil and I'm just going to fill it in. So the biggest enemy at this point is air pockets. So you don't want any air underneath these roots, because what'll happen is during the winter that'll collect. Good Lord, what is that? That air pocket will get colder and it'll freeze the roots. Other thing to do right here is that graft knot again. This needs to be at least 4 inches above the soil line, right? So right now it's actually about 8 inches, which is totally fine. The reason that you don't want to plant it lower is that if this is below the soil line, this will actually start to root, and it kind of circumvents the root system. And what makes rootstock really valuable is the fact that it actually is more adapted to the soil conditions that we're in. So if this starts to root from here, goes into the soil, it's actually going to turn out to be a weaker tree. So take this, kind of get this extra, push it back on. And what I'm doing is I'm just packing down with my hands, making sure that there's no air pockets. Then what we'll do is take the soil. All right. Then after that, what I do is I just drench the tree with water. So just saturate it, as much water as it'll take. And then you can see this tree is pretty crooked. So some twine. Okay. So most people think that if you plant a big tree, it'll grow, it'll get bigger quicker. But this tree will actually outgrow a tree with that diameter within 2 to 3 years. Since the rootstock is planted directly into the soil and there isn't much amendment to it, it actually grows quicker. So this is what they would call about a 3/8 inch or a 1/2 inch caliper. Most nurseries sell the trees when they're like 1 inch to 1.5 inch caliper, and you'll have difficulties the first 2 or 3 years. So you've got a couple different options for your tree guard. We'll kind of work from like Cadillac of tree guards to, I don't even know what that is. So these are ones that I actually got an Orchard Supply. They're amazing. The reason why you want to put a tree guard around the base is to prevent girdling. So last year was the first year that I didn't put tree guards on 2 trees, and they both were girdled. So what'll happen is, as you have snow, the mice will come in underneath the snow, and they'll just chew away the trunk, right? And when they remove the bark, like all of the nutrients in the tree run through the bark, and it'll kill the tree. So you want to use a tree guard. And, I'll just affix this with wire or string, and you'll be set for a while. Now, if you live where I live, you can see that, well, there's the neighbor's cat. You can see how I have the trees protected. I have a tree guard on them to prevent girdling, but then I've had to put fences that are 7 feet tall to prevent the deer from just gnawing on the trees. So yeah, those types of tree guards are really difficult to find. So this is actually like a plastic drainage pipe that I found like 10 of these at the town dump. And so what I did is I just cut a section out of the middle, drilled a couple holes, and I can use these to put around the tree. And they're a little more sturdy, and they're probably better for a small rootstock tree. And then finally, these are probably the most common tree guards that you'll find, and they work just fine. And the thing with these is that, it's plastic, which, isn't, obviously you don't want to use plastic, but the thing is I've had these for, most of these for about 10 years, and you just kind of keep using them over and over and over. All right. So again, this is how you plant bare root trees. Anything you get from, say, like Arbor Day, or any of those nursery suppliers that are online are probably going to ship you bare root trees. And that's how you plant them, either in fall or in spring, ideally spring. So then we're going to plant a potted tree. So as you're planting the potted tree, one of the things to do is to not make the hole too big, right? Some people, they'll dig out like an enormous area. And the problem with that is you've destabilized the soil. And what's going to happen is you're going to have to really stake that tree out well. Otherwise, it's going to tip over in a windstorm. So, you know, only dig the hole as wide as you need it. Okay, so one of the things that I'll do is I'll just take, so we'll get a better look, but right here is the graft knot on this tree. Again, I want this to be 4 inches above the soil, or the top of the soil line. So it's kind of the depth of the shovel, you know, that I'll be sort of in the right area. So one of the things to do is if the soil hasn't been fertilized in a long time, it'll become really hard packed, right? So when you feel it on here, you can't even scratch it with your hand. If that's the case, what you want to do is just take the shovel and break up the sides a little bit. You don't want to destroy the sides, right? You don't want to have just this big basin that you're dropping a tree into. You want this stuff to remain really stable. You just want to break it up a little bit so that the roots have a place where they can start to get into. The other thing I will do, though, is I'll break the bottom up pretty good. And then just to make sure that, you know, that water isn't going to collect on the roots, I'll take, so this is old mulch. This is, it's double ground hardwood mulch. And as double ground hardwood starts to break down, it develops a fungus that's actually beneficial to the roots of the tree. And you can tell it's sort of, so that white fungus in there is actually really good. So if you put that into the bottom, it's going to help the tree drain a little bit. And it's also good for the roots. All right, so if you go to a local nursery, probably find a tree that's something like this. Now, depending on the nursery, it'll depend on how or what they planted it in. A lot of times it's a rootstock mix. So the soil looks a lot like this bark mulch. Other times the soil's going to be heavy. So we'll take the tree and just pull it out. Now what I'm going to do now is, other thing. All right, so this is the graft nut. Don't ever grab the tree up here because you have a chance of ruining that or breaking that graft nut. So what I'm going to do is break up the soil. I'm breaking up the soil on the, so I dug the hole, put the soil in here, and then I took this, the potted tree, I'm breaking off all the excess soil here so that I can start to mix it together. And that's pretty good. It doesn't need to be much more than that. Some of these really long ones, I can just take pruners. So I'm going to set this to the side. The only rule with planting in the fall is you obviously don't want to do it on a day where it's below freezing. But other than that, like, this is the perfect day. There's no sunlight to dry the tree out. It's about, low 40s. All right, so I'm gonna put a little bit of that in. So what I'll start to do is lift a little of the soil up, or lift the roots up and fill in underneath them, and then press them down. It's good to use soil that isn't super hard or clay, something that'll break up pretty easily, because then you're sure that you're packing the roots in. Adjust that a little. And then what I'll do is I'll top dress it with that double ground hardwood mulch. And ideally you want to put, I don't know, I guess about 2 to 3 inches of it on the top. So obviously this is definitely not enough, but you can get the idea. Important thing is just to keep, again, keep the mulch away from the base of the tree. You can see on this tree, the roots came up really high. So we're just going to leave those exposed, let those dry out, fall off. And we're definitely going to keep it away from the graft section. So one of the things in looking at this tree, so this is maybe about 18 inches to 20 inches, and the branches start to come off. Since I have deer that are going to eat branches that are up to 6 feet tall, I need to limb the tree up and start to direct it for, more up than horizontal. For a long time, this was sort of the standard orchard size for trees, have a really short trunk section, and then the limbs come off. But for this yard and for these conditions, what I'm just going to do is just take some of these branches off. Anything that's pointing into the middle comes out. And what I'll do is probably, I'll take that out too. I'm going to pull these two together, and I'm going to see what which branch does better next year, and I'll pick that as the primary branch going forward. Again, you want to wrap it in a tree guard. And since I'm, again, because of the deer, I would put, these are, they call them T-posts. You get 6-foot T-posts, pound them down, and then hardware wire to protect the trees. And it's good. I like it better than, again, like better than getting plastic netting or something like that. And this really seems to keep the deer away. I've tried everything like garlic. My dogs are lazy. They don't chase them. So yeah, the fences are sort of the only option. I think I'm ready for questions if there's any.
Amazing. We definitely have questions. This was really great. This is a really wonderful demonstration. Thank you so much, Sam.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
All right. First question is, how long does it take for a tree to reach full size?
It depends on the tree. So peach trees, you can get to like full size in 2 to 3 years. They grow super quick. Apple trees, depending, so this is an early harvest apple. And as its name implies, it's one of the quickest to get to fruiting. So it's like 2 or 3 years. Whereas there's some old apple varieties that I grow that it takes 10 years before you get a piece of fruit from it.
All right. What are the problems that can arise when your neighbor has a sprinkler system that waters your apple trees?
I don't know. I mean, if this summer, hey, that's great. That's free water, right? Yeah, because we had a drought here, so that's awesome. I mean, as long as it isn't excessive, it's not necessarily going to hurt the tree unless like you dig. A good way to test is dig down like 6 to 8 inches below the soil line and see what the soil consistency is like. If it's like mud, you might need to do something, but if the apple trees are pretty durable. So yeah, I think maybe taking the free water and feeling good about it is pretty. My water bill was outrageous this year, so it was like 3 times normal. So yeah.
All right, follow-up question to when are trees done growing? Specifically, we have an apricot and 3 plums in our garden, and they are 5 years old and 15 feet tall. Are they done growing? I feel like they just keep growing unless you prune them, right?
Yeah, they're gonna keep. They'll keep growing. What'll just happen is it's just you get more diminished growth each year, right? So those trees, they shot up, right? So you planted them, they were probably 4 or 5 feet tall. The first year they grew 5 feet. The second year they grew another 5 feet. So now it's they're 15 feet tall. The way that you control that is just all through pruning. Otherwise they are going to get really big and unmanageable. So I would say prune them because I don't know. I don't like. You ever see orchard ladders, right? They have like the side that you walk up, but then they only have one pole. I've fallen off so many of them. I always try to keep the trees super low. So, yeah, I would say get out the pruners.
Cool. Thank you. We have a question about applying 3% hydrogen peroxide in the growing process. Is that something you would ever add to the soil or to the leaves in like a watered down spray?
Yeah, I've never tried that. So I can't really give a decision on it either way. I find with, yeah, I don't know. I haven't read anything about that, so I can't say. Yeah, I haven't really had to change up too many, knock on wood. I haven't really had to change too many things with the way I plant. I go like pretty simple because typically I'm doing a lot of this each year. So yeah, I'd love to know more if you have anything written about it.
I will say that we did do a webinar on fruit tree pest and disease management. So if you want tips and tricks for that, head to the Green Thumb website and check that out. Okay, next question. What to do with clay soil? Dig holes, amend, removed soil, replace, won't inhibit root growth.
Yeah, what I'll do is, that's probably why I'm doing 3 to 6 months ahead of time. So I'm taking really aged, so 2 to 3 year old compost, and I'm just mixing it into this soil. And so this is about a 4-foot section that just constantly gets turned over and has compost in it. Apple trees are going to do fine in that. You might have a problem with peach trees. So apples, plums, yeah, they're going to be fine. Apricots, peaches, you might want to consider amending the soil. So it's sort of, the other thing that I forgot to mention was the idea of having a raised planter. Raised planters are fantastic for fruit trees. So even just raising it up like 8 inches to a foot is ideal. And sort of the mix that I'll use for planting in a raised bed is 40% topsoil, 40% clean sand. The reason why you want clean sand is that you want to have it washed wherever it's coming from. I got some from the local quarry a couple of years ago, and it was so alkaline that it kind of poisoned all of the soil I was using. So make sure you're using wash sand, and then I'll do 20% compost with no more than like 6 to 10% organic matter in it, right? So again, that's 40% topsoil, 40% clean wash sand, 20% compost, no more than like 6% organic.
Cool, thank you. I also want to make a plug for containers and amending the soil, especially within the 5 boroughs of New York City. Most of our soil has heavy metals in it, and while they aren't likely to end up in your fruit, they still can if they're in high quantities. But adding compost and adding wood chips goes a long way for that.
Hey, how much time do we have left?
11 minutes.
Oh, cool. I can go into the backyard and show you guys container trees if you want.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll keep asking questions and you can keep answering them.
Okay, cool.
While you're walking, can you remind us about why the north orientation of the root graft nut?
Oh, okay. So what's going to happen is in the winter, the trees, so the sun sits lower during the winter. And what can happen is they call it southwest sun injury. So if the tree is getting direct sunlight from the southwest, it can scald the trunk even during winter, right? So that helps prevent it. Also, by pointing it to the north, it's not exposed to as much weather, right? So all your storms are probably going to come from the west or from the east. Okay.
Cool.
All right. So, okay. So these are Santa Rosa plums. So they're probably, I don't know, they're 8, 9 feet tall. And how I grow them is that I grow all of my fruit trees that I plan to place somewhere in wooden boxes. So these boxes are, I think the dimensions are 18 by 18, and they're 16 inches deep. I drill holes in the bottom, and the reason why I like this square format is they're a lot easier to move. If you have a larger round pot, that thing is like a monster. And the other thing I did too was that, I think we're going to call these workshops like great things that you can find at the dump. But I found a whole bunch of this polystyrene. So it was like 3 or 4 inch thick styrofoam. And I put it in plastic bags, and I wrap these around the tree every winter because we get like, it gets really cold here. We're, negative teens.
Remind
And
everyone where you are.
oh, I'm in Syracuse. But even if I was in New York, I would bury in my trees. It's just a good practice to do. It's going to keep the root system from getting injured. And so again, like this recycled polystyrene I've been able to use for like 10 years to keep, and you can kind of,
Oops, we lost the video.
oh, sorry.
It's okay. We can still hear you. Oh, there it is.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. There we go. So you can see that's sort of what they look like. You see the tree guards right here. And then we'll go over. So those are the stock trees where we did the grafting. And then this is what I'll do with potted trees back here. So you can see, so those are just trees that are in black pots. And then, they're buried pretty much 3/4 of the way up in mulch. The good thing about it is this mulch breaks down over a couple years, and it gets perfect for mixing into soils to add some of those beneficial fungi.
Very cool. Thanks for showing us that. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Someone would like to know pear varieties for best spur-grown fruit.
Oh, geez. I wouldn't know enough about that. No, I just started getting into pears a couple years ago, so definitely not my forte. Yeah, but I would, if you can, and you live in New York, I'm trying to track down this summer buncratine, which was the original. There's that Stuyvesant pear that was planted in 1650 and lasted till 1850 on 13th Street and 3rd Avenue. But that's my recent thing I'm trying to find, which that just sounds really nerdy as I say that.
Awesome. Speaking of varieties, someone asked if you could name the trees that you planted during the demonstration today.
Oh, okay. So there's an early harvest. That's an apple. So it's a New York City variety apple. And then the other one was this. I grew out a ton of these rootstock. This is Puente. So yeah, this is what the rootstock is. So in California, they call it Puente or bridge. Out here, they call it a Dara. It's a Spanish plum variety, but it's compatible with cherry trees. And I use it a lot to make the tree of 40 fruit. Cherries don't readily graft to plum trees, so you have to use what they call an interstock variety. So this is a plum rootstock. This is that Puente or Adara, and then I can graft cherries onto the top of this. So that's what we're working with today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What about making a berm rim around the tree for future watering collection sink? And can you talk a little bit about mulching with wood chips?
Yeah, I try to, in terms of the berm around the tree, we're kind of lucky here in, central New York. We almost never have to worry about water. In fact, this was the first year that, a lot of the growers that I talked to were actually worried about water at all. It's usually just really, it's kind of perfect during the summer. If you live somewhere where water's at a premium, definitely West Coast, you're going to want to put the berm around them to control as much of the water as possible, right? To direct it all into the root system. Most of the water that's going to get absorbed by the tree. So after the first year, most of the water is going to be occurring around the drip line. The drip line is the edge of the outermost leaves, right? So if you build that berm just outside of that to contain the water have it directed towards the drip line. That's how you take most advantage of the water that you're using and you have.
Thank you. Someone named April offered some really great tips that I want to make sure I'm just going to say them out loud. And if you have any like thoughts or additions, go ahead. But lots of trees and shrubs from nurseries and catalogs arrive root bound. I suggest washing these roots, spreading them out, and adjusting the size of the hole to accommodate them, or in severe cases where roots may be 2 to 3 feet long, trimming some of those. Great tips. Thank you so much. And then what should be done each spring to the fruit trees? Add new fertilizer? If so, what kind? New mulch, prune? And for that question, for like a more detailed answer, I'll point that person to the other webinars that we've offered on the GreenThumb website. But we have 3 minutes left if you want to like offer some closing words, Sam.
Okay. First of all, make a calendar. So I have like this whole calendar set up when I need to do things. When it's April, usually I do all my pruning in January. I get all the grafting material that I need stored away, refrigerated. When I get the first 3 days that are above 50 degrees, I spray the trees with copper. So that's a liquid copper. It's organic, OMRI, and a lot of that is to keep down on fungus. I get a ton of peach leaf curl up here, so I'm trying to keep down that leaf curl, usually because we have really wet springs. At that point, I'm also looking at the fruit set and trying to make sure everything's getting pollinated. But usually that's the best time to look at the trees because it's so beautiful that time of year. So that's a short 3-minute answer.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sam. This was a really awesome webinar.
Awesome.
Really
Thank you guys.
appreciate all the work you put into like setting up your whole front yard so that we could do this today.
Hey, and I just wanted to say to John Bowne High School, thank you guys so much for joining this. It's like my sister and I were like in FAA and that sort of stuff when we were growing up, and that's so cool. I can't believe there's an agriculture school in New York. That's amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Woohoo! Awesome. Great. Thanks everyone so much for tuning in.